The morning Dale Morrow's equipment line went under the hammer, Wayne Lawson was standing at the fence with his hands in his jacket pockets and his cap pulled down against the October wind. He had driven 14 miles on county blacktop to get there, in the same three-quarter-ton pickup he had been driving since 1977, and he had parked it at the far end of the lot, away from the other trucks, the way a man parks when he does not intend to stay long but knows he probably will. The auctioneer was working fast. Row planters, a pair of late-model grain wagons, a loader tractor with barely 500 hours on it, two combines that still smelled like new hydraulic fluid, all of it rolling through at prices that made the crowd go quiet because the prices were low, and everyone standing there knew why. Dale had financed the floor of his dealership in 1988 with borrowed money, on top of borrowed money, and when the credit terms tightened and the farm economy stayed flat and the payments came due faster than the sales did, there was nothing behind the chrome but more debt. Wayne watched the loader tractor sell for $6,200. He did not say anything to the man standing next to him. He just watched. And if anyone at that fence had looked at Wayne that morning and tried to guess what was going on inside his head, they probably would have guessed wrong, the way people had been guessing wrong about Wayne Lawson for the better part of 20 years. Let me tell you how it started. Wayne was 26 years old in the spring of 1974 when his father passed and left him a section and a quarter of river-bottom ground in Granger County, along with a worn 1961 Farmall 560 that had been running since before Wayne graduated high school, and a spiral-bound notebook that his father had kept on the shelf above the workbench in the machine shed. The notebook was not a journal. It was a repair log, page after page of handwritten entries, dated and detailed, listing every part replaced on every piece of equipment the family had owned since 1952, with the cost of the part, the source, and a short note about what the repair required. Wayne sat at the kitchen table the night after the funeral and read that notebook cover to cover. It took him 3 hours. When he was done, he set it on the shelf above his own workbench, in the same spot his father had kept it, and the next morning he called the insurance company and dropped the coverage on the 560 and the field cultivator and the 2 grain wagons, because none of them carried a lien, and a man who owns something outright and knows how to fix it can make his own calculation about what risk looks like. The insurance agent on the other end of that phone call was a man named Dale Morrow. Dale was 32 years old, confident in the way that men are confident when everything they have tried so far has worked, and he had recently added an equipment dealership to his agency business, which meant he now sold both the machinery and the coverage for it, and he saw very little reason to separate the two. When Wayne told him he was dropping the equipment policies, Dale said, "You sure about that, Wayne? That old 560 breaks down at the wrong time. You're looking at a real problem." Wayne said he would manage. Dale paused for a moment, the way a man pauses when he thinks the other person is making a mistake but has decided not to press it any further. "All right," he said. "Your call." What Dale did not know and did not ask about was the repair log. What Dale did not know was that Wayne had watched his father pull that 560 apart and put it back together twice before Wayne was old enough to drive it, and that by the time Wayne inherited it, he could rebuild the carburetor from memory, had machined a sleeve for the left brake housing himself, and kept a standing account at a parts supplier in the county seat that he paid in full every 30 days. The 560 was not a liability. It was a tool Wayne understood completely, and he had decided that complete understanding was its own kind of insurance. That philosophy did not appear from nowhere. It came directly from the notebook, from his father's careful accounting of 22 years of repairs, which, added up across that entire span, to less than what a single year of comprehensive equipment coverage would have cost at 1974 rates. Wayne had done the arithmetic on the kitchen table the same night he read the log. He had not made the decision out of stubbornness or pride. He had made it out of arithmetic. The following spring, Wayne's neighbor to the east, a man named Gerald Holt, drove home in a new tractor he had financed through Dale's dealership, a 1975 model with a cab and a radio and a loader bucket that could lift 1,200 pounds, and Gerald was genuinely pleased with it. The way a man is pleased when he has acquired something that impresses the people around him. Dale had arranged the note himself and had thrown in the first year of equipment insurance at a discount, and Gerald shook his hand twice, leaving the lot. Wayne saw the tractor pull into Gerald's yard from across the fence line. He noted the cab, the loader, the color, and then he went back to adjusting the row spacing on his cultivator. At the co-op counter that fall, Dale was waiting for a parts order when Wayne came in for seed treatment, and Dale nodded toward the parking lot, where Wayne's 560 sat idling. "Still running that old 560, Wayne?" He said it the way a man says something he already knows the answer to. "Uninsurable thing breaks down at harvest. You're going to be in a real bind. No coverage, no backup plan. That's not a real comfortable position." Wayne picked up his seed treatment. "It won't break down at harvest," he said. Dale smiled. It was a patient, friendly smile, the kind a man wears when he is being kind to someone he has already decided is wrong. "How do you know that?" "Because I go through it every March," Wayne said, "and I know what's in it." Dale shook his head slightly, still smiling, and that was how the conversation ended. But there were 4 other men at that counter, and every one of them heard what was said, and most of them already had their own opinions about Wayne Lawson and his old red tractor and his paid-for ground and his policy of not insuring machinery he could fix with his own hands. The general opinion in Granger County in 1975 was that Wayne was behind. He was not keeping up. A man farming with a 1961 tractor when his neighbors were buying cabs and radios and loader buckets was a man who was losing ground, and Dale had put the observation into plain language at the co-op counter, and everyone present had nodded along, or close enough to nodding. Wayne's younger brother, Chet, farmed 30 miles north in the same county, and Chet had watched the equipment decisions that Dale represented and decided they made sense. Not out of any particular desire for new machinery, but because the lenders made the terms easy and the dealers made the payments feel manageable. And Chet was farming 400 acres with a note on his combine and another note on his field cultivator and a third note on the grain bin addition he had put up in 1977. And it all worked fine as long as the interest rates stayed where they were. They did not stay where they were. By 1982, the prime rate had climbed past 18%, and by the summer of 1983, it touched 21. Chet's combine note, which had been signed at a variable rate in 1979, repriced, and the payment went up by $340 a month. He refinanced in the fall of 1983, extending the term to get the payment back down, and it cost him $2,000 in fees to do it, and he came out the other side owing slightly more than he had going in. He called Wayne from the kitchen after he signed the papers, and his voice had a flatness to it that had not been there before. "I'm all right," Chet said. "Just tighter than I'd like." Wayne said he understood. "You're not feeling any of this, are you?" Chet said. It was not quite a question. "No," Wayne said. "Not on the equipment side." There was a pause on the line. "That 560 still running?" "Pulled 400 acres last spring," Wayne said. Chet made a sound that was part acknowledgement and part something harder to name, and then they talked about their mother for a while and said goodnight. Wayne sat at the table after he hung up the phone, and he thought about Chet's voice and the $340 a month and the $2,000 in fees, and he wrote those numbers in the margin of his own ledger, not to keep score, but because he wanted to understand exactly what had been paid. Meanwhile, in 1979, Wayne had paid $4,200 in cash for a used 1968 combine that a retiring neighbor named Orville Pace had listed in the County Agri-News for 2 weeks before anyone called him. Wayne called on the second Tuesday. He loaded the machine on a borrowed trailer, drove it to his equipment shed, and spent 11 days rebuilding the header, working from the repair log and from a service manual he had ordered from the original manufacturer's distributor in March of that year. He replaced the reel tines, refaced the cutter bar segments, and rebuilt the feeder house drive chain from a bulk spool he had ordered at costs through the parts supplier. When he was done, the combine ran cleaner than it had left the factory, or close enough that the difference did not matter in a field. He harvested 400 acres of corn with it that October, and his total cost for the machine and the rebuild came to $5,600 all in. A comparable new combine in 1979 would have listed at $62,000 before trade. He had no intention of buying a comparable new combine. He intended to run what he had, fix what broke, and keep the money that other people were sending to the bank. He entered the combine in the repair log the night he finished the rebuild. Make, model, year, purchase price, parts cost itemized, labor his own. He drew a line under the entry and wrote the total at the bottom in his father's style, neat and final. If you have found this channel and you want to understand what this story is really about, stay with it. The numbers are going to get clearer as we go, and so is what they mean. It is worth your time. The year 1988 was a particular kind of good for Dale Morrow, which is to say it looked good from the outside. He had expanded the dealership into a second line of equipment in 1986, added 2 salespeople and a parts manager, and taken on a floor plan financing arrangement with a regional lender that allowed him to stock inventory he had not yet paid for, against the assumption that the machines would sell before the interest accrued, past a manageable point. The lot was full of new equipment, green and red, lined up in the sun, and Dale had bought himself a new pickup with a chrome package and leather interior, and he wore good boots to work every day, the kind that have never seen a mudroom. At the county fair that summer, Dale was standing in the grandstand concession line when Wayne walked past below with Lena and their 2 boys. Dale saw him and called down, loud enough for the people around him to hear, "Wayne Lawson, still running that old equipment, or did you finally break down and buy something this decade?" There was laughter. Not mean laughter, but the comfortable laughter of people who know the joke and are glad someone said it. Wayne looked up, found Dale's face in the grandstand, and nodded once. He did not stop walking. Lena took his arm, and they walked on past the livestock barns toward the 4-H exhibit hall, and Wayne did not say anything about it for the rest of that afternoon. That night, driving home in the dark, he said, "Dale's lot is stocked pretty heavy." Lena looked at him. "Is that good or bad?" "Depends on whether he's selling faster than he's paying," Wayne said. Lena thought about that. Wayne kept his eyes on the road. The fair incident was not the first time Dale had said something similar in a crowd, and it was not the last. He had made the same general observation at the church social in June, within earshot of the pastor and 3 deacons, calling Wayne's approach to equipment old-fashioned stubbornness, and adding with his easy smile that a man without insurance on his machinery was one breakdown away from losing a harvest. It got a polite laugh. It always got a polite laugh. Dale was good company, and the observation was not wrong on its face. It was just measuring the wrong things. Roy Breck had heard a version of it at the Granger County Extension Office, where Roy worked as an agronomist and spent a fair amount of his time watching farm operations across the county and thinking about what the data behind them meant. Roy had met Wayne twice at extension meetings, and he had noted, professionally, that Wayne's per-acre equipment cost was unusually low, low enough that Roy had started tracking it informally in 1985, writing Wayne's annual repair and fuel numbers in a side column of his own field notebook, next to the averages he was pulling from state extension surveys. Roy was skeptical of Wayne's method at first, the way an extension agent is skeptical of anything that deviates from the published recommendations. Dropping insurance on farm equipment was not, technically, a violation of anything. But it was not what Roy would have recommended to a beginning farmer, and he said so to Wayne directly at a 1986 meeting. Wayne listened politely and then said, "The numbers I'm running suggest the risk is manageable. I'd be glad to show you the log if you wanted to see the data." Roy had said he might take Wayne up on that sometime. He took him up on it in the spring of 1992, after the data had become impossible to ignore. But that is getting ahead of the story. In 1991, the thing that Wayne had seen in Dale's inventory numbers 2 years earlier at the fair came fully visible to everyone else. Dale's floor plan lender, the regional firm that had been carrying the unsold inventory against the monthly interest charges, called the balance in the spring after Dale missed 2 consecutive payments during a slow winter. The machinery that had not sold was repossessed. The machinery that had been sold on dealer-arranged notes was recalled into a receivership process that took most of the spring to complete. And on a Tuesday in October of 1991, Dale's remaining equipment line went under the hammer at a public auction in his own gravel lot. Wayne had driven 14 miles to be there, and he stood at the fence and watched the loader tractors sell for $6,200, and the grain wagons sell for less than Gerald Holt had paid for his first new set in 1976, and the late-model combines sell for amounts that did not come close to covering what was owed on them. Dale was there. He stood near the office trailer on the far side of the lot, wearing a good coat, and Wayne could see from the fence that Dale was keeping his face still in the way that takes effort. He was not a bad man. He had been confident in a method that worked until it stopped working, and now it had stopped, publicly and completely, in front of people he had known for 20 years. That is a hard thing. Wayne did not feel anything like satisfaction looking at him across that lot. He felt something closer to recognition, the way you feel when a prediction you made privately turns out to be exactly right, and you would have preferred to be wrong. After the auction, Roy Breck found Wayne at the fence and stood beside him for a moment. "Your numbers look different from everyone else's out here," Roy said. "Always have. I've been watching your per-acre repair cost for about 7 years." "I know," Wayne said. Roy looked at him. "I want to publish it. Write it up formally as an extension case study on equipment management, cost per acre data, maintenance methodology, insurance decision rationale. Would you be willing?" Wayne said he would think about it. He called Roy 2 days later and said yes. The report came out in 1993, under Roy's name and the Extension Office banner, 16 pages of data, covering 8 years of documented repair costs, fuel consumption, field hours, and per-acre equipment expense for a 1,200-acre Operation in Granger County. Roy had compared Wayne's figures against the published state averages and against two other county case studies. Wayne's per-acre equipment cost ran at 62% of the county average across the 8-year period. His unscheduled downtime, the kind that costs a harvest day, had occurred twice, both times in the first 3 years, and Wayne had repaired both failures himself without a service call at a combined parts cost of $312. The report did not name Wayne by county record name, but anyone in Granger County who read it and thought about which farmer in the region matched those numbers could have figured it out in about 30 seconds. Dale read it. Roy told Wayne that later at a December extension meeting. He asked me who the case study was, Roy said. What did you tell him? Wayne asked. I told him he probably already knew. By the time that report was published, Wayne had expanded his owned acreage to 940 acres, all of it paid for. He was farming with the 1968 combine, which by 1993 had logged over 4,000 field hours and still cut clean with a rebuilt feeder house and a second cutter bar that Wayne had sourced from a dismantled machine a neighbor was scrapping in 1989. He had added a second tractor in 1984, a used 1972 model that he had picked up at a farm sale for $3,100, and he ran both machines on the same principle he had applied to the 560 and the combine. Know exactly what is in it, maintain it completely in the off-season, and carry no debt on anything that sits in the shed. The 560 was still running. Chet had stabilized by the mid-1990s, slowly, the way a man stabilizes after refinancing into a longer term and watching his spending more carefully than he used to. He had come through the rate spike period with his farm intact, which was more than some of his neighbors could say, and he had watched his brother's equipment costs from a distance during those years with a complicated mix of feeling that had finally settled, by about 1995, into something resembling conviction. He visited Wayne's farm in the spring of that year and spent an afternoon in the machine shed while Wayne went through the 560's hydraulic system. And by the time they were eating supper, he had asked Wayne to walk him through the repair log method from the beginning. Wayne got the notebook off the shelf and set it on the table between them. He turned to the first entry, which his father had made in February of 1952, and Chet leaned over and read it. Your dad wrote this, Chet said. Started it, Wayne said. I've been adding to it since 1974. Chet turned a few pages, slowly. The entries went forward through the decades, the handwriting shifting from their father's loose cursive to Wayne's tighter print, but the format the same. Date, machine, part, cost, source, note. This is the whole thing, Chet said. This is how you know. Wayne nodded. That's how you know. By 2003, Wayne owned 1,200 acres outright. He held no operating loan, no equipment note, no line of credit he had not already satisfied. The 560 had been retired from primary field work 2 years earlier, not because it had failed, but because Wayne had found a third tractor at a farm sale in 2001, a 1979 model with low hours, and he moved the 560 to utility work around the yard and the machine shed, where it pulled the loader and ran the auger and started every morning without a complaint. He still maintained it on the same schedule. He still wrote in the repair log when he did any work on it, 1,200 acres in Granger County, 0 debt. That was the number. It was not dramatic when it happened. Wayne wrote it in his farm ledger the way he wrote everything, neatly and finally, and then he went out and checked the moisture on a bin of soybeans he was holding for better basis, and then he came in for supper. Lena had known the number was coming for about 3 years. She was the one who kept the household ledger, the actual handwritten account of what came in and what went out, the one with the bank statements clipped to the inside cover, and the column totals added in red ink at the bottom of each page. She had tracked the last operating loan down to zero through 2001 and 2002 and into the spring of 2003. And when she wrote the final zero in the balance column, she put a small check mark beside it that she had not planned in advance. It was just there when she put down the pen. She did not talk about the number much. Wayne did not talk about it at all. They were not people who talked about their financial position with other people, partly out of habit, and partly because the conversation had nowhere to go. A man who does not borrow money and does not advertise his savings has very little to say about it to the people around him, and saying nothing had always served Wayne well. There was one night in the spring of 2011 when Lena sat across from Wayne after supper and told him she thought he should consider trading in the 1968 Combine. It was 43 years old by then. It had been rebuilt 4 times, and the most recent header rebuild had taken Wayne 3 weeks and cost $1,100 in parts, and the week after he finished it, she had found him sitting on the machine shed floor at 10 o'clock at night, rereading the service manual section on the feeder house bearing replacement for the 2nd time that month, because a noise had come up that he wanted to understand before it became something larger. "It's not that I think we can't afford a new one," Lena said. She set her coffee down on the table. "I know we can. I just want you to think about whether it still makes sense the way it did in 1979. Wayne sat with that for a moment. He had thought about it himself more than she knew, and the thinking had a private uncertainty in it that was different from the clean arithmetic of the earlier decisions. The old Combine was not what it had been. He knew exactly what was in it, and he also knew how many hours were on those castings, and what that number meant for the remaining working life of the machine. He got up and went to the shelf and brought the repair log back to the table. He opened it to the Combine section and turned it toward her and went through the cost columns from 1979 to 2011. Parts totaled $14,200 across 32 years. Service calls totaled 0. Unscheduled field downtime had cost him 6 harvest days across the whole period, which he had calculated at approximately $9,000 in lost efficiency. All in, the machine had cost him $23,400 over 3 decades, including the original purchase price, to harvest what a new $60,000 machine would have harvested for considerably more. "There's no version of that arithmetic that says buy new," he said, "unless I'm wrong about how many years I have left to farm it." Lena looked at the columns for a long time. "And how many years do you think you have?" Wayne looked at her. 10, he said. "Maybe 12. She nodded slowly, the doubt going somewhere quieter inside her. Not gone, but satisfied. "All right," she said. "Then we keep it." The Combine ran another 12 seasons after that conversation, with one more full header rebuild in 2016 and a feeder house drive replacement in 2019 that Wayne did in 4 days with parts he had pre-ordered in the spring. The noise he had been investigating in 2011 turned out to be a worn idler sheave bracket, a $37 part that he replaced in an afternoon. He wrote it in the log the same evening. If you are watching this and you are thinking about what Wayne's method actually required of a person, the answer is this. It required knowing your equipment well enough that the risk of failure was something you could calculate rather than something you feared. And it required keeping records long enough that the calculation stayed honest. That was the whole thing. It was not comfortable, and it was not simple, But it was his, and it worked, and the log was the proof. By 2024, Wayne was 76 years old. He had farmed the same ground for 50 years, and the 560 still sat in the corner of the machine shed doing yard work, and the 1968 combine had been retired the previous fall after the 2023 harvest, not because it failed, but because Wayne had decided that 55 years and several thousand field hours was an honorable end for a machine that had started at $5,600 and returned more bushels per dollar than anything else in the county by a margin. Roy's 1993 report had documented, and that every farmer in Granger County who read it had quietly believed. Wayne's grandson Travis was 23 years old and had been farming alongside Wayne for 3 seasons, learning the rotation and the drainage patterns and the way the South Field's clay subsoil held water differently in a wet spring than the black loam along the creek. The kind of knowledge that does not transfer through a manual, but does transfer through 3 seasons of walking the same ground with someone who has walked it for 50 years. In March of 2024, Wayne sat down with Travis at the kitchen table, with Lena on one side and the farm ledger open on the other, and he laid out the terms he had been thinking through for 2 years. Travis would lease 320 acres of the home ground at a below-market rate, structured with no interest and a first-option purchase agreement that gave Travis the right to buy at a fixed price over a 10-year window before the land was offered to anyone else. The lease payment was set at a level that Travis could meet from normal corn and soybean returns in an average price year, with enough left over to fund his own maintenance account and make a beginning on the kind of cash reserves that take the fear out of equipment decisions. Wayne slid the lease agreement across the table. Travis looked at it for a long moment without picking it up. "Why are you doing it this way?" Travis asked. Wayne said, "Because it's the way that works." "You could get more per acre from outside operators," Travis said. "I know that," Wayne said. Travis looked at Lena. She was watching Wayne, with the small, steady look she had worn at every important decision in the last 50 years. He picked up the lease and read it carefully all the way through, and when he was done, he set it back on the table and said he wanted to sign it. Wayne nodded. He got up from the table and went to the machine shed. He came back carrying the repair logbook, which had grown from a single, spiral-bound notebook into a second volume that Wayne had started in 1998 when the first one ran out of pages. Both volumes held together with a heavy rubber band his father had put on the original notebook sometime in the 1960s, and that was still intact and still holding. He set them on the table in front of Travis. "No, this is the other part of the arrangement," he said. Travis picked up the top volume and opened it to the first page, his great-grandfather's entry from 1952, the same entry Chet had read at this same table in 1995. Chet was in the room. He had driven over that morning, as he did most Saturdays now, and he was sitting in the chair by the window with his coffee. And when he saw Travis open the notebook, Chet set his cup down on the windowsill and did not pick it up again. "Every piece of equipment on this place has an entry in that book," Wayne said to Travis. "Parts, dates, cost, what the repair required. You add your own entries the same way. You don't skip one. You don't summarize. You write it down the same day." Travis turned a few pages. The handwriting changed about a third of the way through the first volume, from the older cursive to Wayne's plain print, and then about 2/3 of the way through the second volume, there were several entries in a different hand entirely, careful and squared, where Travis had begun making his own notes under Wayne's instruction during the last 2 seasons. Travis looked up. "I already have entries in here." "I know," Wayne said. "That's why I'm giving it to you." The formal extension of the lease took another 2 weeks to finalize, and Roy Breck, who was fully retired by 2024 but still occasionally consulted with the Granger County Extension Office on a volunteer basis, heard about it through the farm community and called Wayne in April to tell him he was glad to know it. Roy had updated his 1993 equipment report twice in the intervening years, once in 2001 and once in 2008, and each update had widened the cost per acre gap in Wayne's favor. The cumulative per acre equipment cost across Wayne's operation, from 1974 to 2023, had run at approximately 58% of the county average for comparable grain operations. That was the number Roy stated when he called, matter-of-factly, the way extension agents state things. Wayne said, "I appreciate you keeping track of it." Roy said the data had kept track of itself. He just wrote it down. Dale Morrow had sold the remains of his insurance business to a regional firm in 1994 and had spent the years since largely retired, living on the west side of town in a house he had paid off slowly through the late 1990s. He and Wayne had passed each other at the co-op and the grain elevator and the diner on Main Street for 30 years after the auction, and they had been civil in the way that people are civil when they have both been present for something that does not need to be revisited. Dale had never said anything further about Wayne's equipment approach, and Wayne had never said anything about the auction. The correction had been made by the arithmetic and by the credit market and by the impersonal machinery of borrowed money coming due, not by Wayne, and there was nothing left to say about it. There was one moment at the grain elevator in the fall of 2019 when Dale had come in to settle an old storage account, and Wayne happened to be at the counter weighing in a load. They stood next to each other for a moment while the scale ticket printed. Dale looked older, thinner, less certain of the room than he had been at the dealership, and Wayne thought he looked like a man who had made his peace with something and was living inside that peace the way you live inside a house that has settled. Not perfectly level, but yours and holding. Dale said, "That old 560 still around?" Wayne said it was. Dale nodded once. He looked down at the counter. "You knew what you were doing," he said. "It was not quite an apology. It was the thing that comes after an apology has already been absorbed by time. The small, plain statement that is its own kind of settlement." Wayne took his scale ticket. "My dad knew," he said. "I just read his notebook." They went their separate ways. The 560 ran through the 2023 season on yard work, pulling the loader and running the auger and starting without complaint on cold mornings, the way it had started without complaint for 50 years in Granger County. Wayne did his final entry in the repair logbook on the 560 that October, after replacing a hydraulic fitting that had begun to seep, a $2 part that took him 20 minutes. He dated it, noted the machine, noted the part, noted the cost, and drew a line under it the way his father had drawn lines under completed things. He handed the logbook to Travis at the kitchen table in March, and Travis signed the lease, and Lena made coffee, and Chet sat by the window with his cup in both hands, saying very little, which was what Chet did now when something mattered to him. The farm was not what anyone driving by would have called impressive, even now. The house was the same house Wayne had grown up in, with the same kitchen, the same shelf above the workbench, the same single lamp over the table. The machine shed was tidy and organized and contained equipment that no dealer in Granger County would have assigned much value to if you walked them through it, item by item, and asked what it would bring at auction. The 560 sat in the corner running a light trickle of oil from a seal that Wayne had decided was worth watching, rather than pulling apart again at this point in the machine's life, which was fair at 63 years of work. What the farm contained that no one driving by could see was 1,200 acres of paid ground and a repair log going back to 1952, and the arithmetic of what it cost to own a thing outright and maintain it carefully for 50 years against the arithmetic of what it cost to finance a thing and insure it and send the payments to someone else from now until the note is satisfied. Wayne had never stated that arithmetic directly to anyone who had not asked him. He did not have any interest in converting people to his method. He had developed it from his father's data, applied it to his own operation, and documented the results honestly, and the results were the argument, and the argument was complete. The repair logbook sat on the shelf above Travis's workbench that spring, both volumes, held together with the rubber band from the 1960s that was still intact and still holding. Travis wrote his first independent entry on the evening of April 12th, after he replaced a worn bushing on the used combine he had purchased the previous fall for $6,400 cash, using money he had put aside across 3 seasons of working for Wayne at an honest wage. He wrote the date, the machine, the part, the cost, and a short note about what the repair had required, in the same format Wayne had used for 50 years and Wayne's father had used for 20 years before that. He drew a line under it, neat and final, the way a man draws a line under a thing he intends to keep doing. The lamp was still on at 10 o'clock.